Welcome to the Business Buyer Diaries. My name is Nathan Platter. I'm a full-time employee, and I bought a business. I did everything right, from finding the deal, handling all the due diligence on 63 opportunities, and ultimately bought a profitable gym. And boy, was I in for a big surprise as a new owner. I chronicled everything in real time, including the biggest wins to the stressful nights at 2 a.m. I'm sharing my journey without sugarcoating anything, so you don't make the same mistakes that I did. Here's today's episode.
Hey, good morning. Well, it's kind of interesting. So a random person called the club over the weekend. He's like, "Hey, I want to buy into the franchise system. I want to own my own studio." And so my person was like, "Okay, cool. Here's the owner's number. You guys should talk." And cool. So I talked to the guy yesterday. Small world. The guy, basically expressed interest in my studio, or not my studio. He expressed interest in a studio, signed an NDA and all that, and once he found out the brand, he started calling folks that are local owner operators in the area to get a feel for it. The guy has an NDA for the studio that I bailed on for due diligence, and so he's just like, "Hey, do you know much about that location? Do you know all the financials? Here's the seller's name. I think he has this background." And I've already seen the whole studio, seen the whole package. I've seen everything. It's the same studio I had a bank loan getting underwritten for that I ended up bailing on. So now I'm in a conundrum. I'm back and forth. Do I just say, "Oh yes, on paper it looks good," and then do I give a very vanilla answer, and I basically give nothing so I don't hold myself up for any repercussions? Or do I say, "Hey, I didn't go through on it because here's my experience with studio number one, and I don't know what's going on with studio number two." And he's only checking out studio number two. That's his first ever studio. And as weird as it is, he also works in tech. Very similar. It's on the same kind of role through the same company. Very good chance we'd be on the same team. So we have a very similar background and a very And so I'm torn. I could either be very blank, very unhelpful, very disengaged, or I can say, "Hey, here's what I thought for studio number one. I don't know if that's the case for studio number two." And then I can give a little bit more insight. I'm friends with the broker. I'm still somewhat tied to the seller of number two because I still have to switch over utilities and a few other dollars. And then we're still the same franchise. So it's not the gentleman agreement to throw a peer under the bus. But if that peer is doing stuff that is non-kosher to business practices and accounting practices and financial practices, then also has to be called out. That's BS. So my plan of attack right now is say, "Hey, here's my experience the first 90 days of owning studio number one. I have no idea if that would be the case for studio number two. Maybe, maybe not. In hindsight, here's what I would have done. 12 months of bank statements, 12 months of payroll runs, 12 months of employment records for the management team and prior management, 12 months of seeing owner withdrawal, dividends, payroll. I also would want to verify the current membership structure. I'd want in the purchase agreement to not have any PIP runs. I'd also want an obligation for the seller to maintain marketing spend in concordance with the prior 13 months or 15 months of business history, and or a certain ad spend threshold that would indicate a guaranteed minimum number of members, which I think should be $2,000 or $3,000 a month. If it costs $200 to gain a member, and you need 10 members to keep stable, then $2,000 a month in ad spend. But I don't know what their thing is. And so I'm not going to dive into "Hey, here's where I think things are in question of the seller's character." But I am going to say "Hey, in hindsight, here are the things I should have asked for. And here's what would have helped me get a better pinpoint on business valuation." So that's where I'm going to go with it, because the broker and I are on good terms. The seller and seller number two and I, we're on fine terms. But he doesn't know that we're diving into if there's some issues at play beyond the business transaction. And we're going to see how this all goes down. at the end of the day, let's pretend here. Say the seller gets all, or the buyer gets all this information and they like what they see and they still buy it. They now know what they're getting into and I have a clean conscience. That's good. Now I tell this all to the seller or to the buyer and they're like, oh, I don't want to do this. And then they bail on the deal. Then this one buyer doesn't proceed on deal. And let's pretend I'm right on my assumptions that this is a bad studio to purchase. It's either a great studio or a bad studio or an average studio. If it's an average studio, it doesn't matter. If it's a great studio, then I am just paranoid beyond belief and I am just off base. If it is a bad studio, then eventually someone is going to buy it. Either the seller will have to be locked out of being able to buy it. Like if they, I don't know, I have a few ideas in my head, but the seller is going to find a way to sell it. You can work with a different broker, work with a different selling avenue. There's 100 ways to sell a business. And I could stand up and do the right thing and prevent 10 people from buying it, but there's 100 ways to go. There's still 90 other ways to sell a business. So at the end of the day, I'm not going to be a superhero and be able to rescue someone from buying this business if it's a bad business. Now, if it's a fine business, then it's cool. Like someone's going to buy it. And if it's a seller business, then I don't need to be the vigilante going around town making sure the world is protected from buying this one bad business. There's lots of bad businesses out there. Lots of good business. Lots of amazing businesses. At the end of the day, my obligation is to do the right thing morally and legally along the way. So what I need to do is tell the buyer, hey, here's my experience. I was expecting to be in the green $20,000 to $30,000. Right now we're in the whole $25,000. Here's what I would have looked at to make sure that I knew what I was buying in. 12 months of bank statements. I want admin access to the marketing channels like Facebook and Instagram. I'd want to have 12 months of payroll stub history to verify that. I'd want to have, that's about it right there, tax records, but that's really there. But I know the seller doesn't even work as a payroll processor. They use a checkbook out of their back pocket to do payroll. And so I know if anyone asks for a payroll history, there is none. And so how can you verify payroll? You can't. And that is bad news to the seller. All you need to do if you're a seller kind of pull the wool over some of the eyes is just keep looking until someone buys into something and they're not followed in due diligence, and then you sell your business. So at the end of the day, this thing is going to sell. It's probably going to sell for what it looks like on paper. And kudos to the buyer for doing due diligence. So I'm going to reconnect with the seller today. I'm going to share with him what the whole process looks like. It's funny you said there's two listings. It's, this is the one listing I know about. I'm happy to talk further. Oh, that's the plan of action for the first one. So the other listing you saw, it's for a very well-known franchisee in the system. All in all, within the franchise system, there's a lot more clubs to sell than I thought there would be in a 50-club franchise. And that's really surprising. And so I don't know if that's not good or bad. It's just indicative of 2 years of financial post-pandemic. People are probably maxed out, tired out, ready to move on to other ventures. And so what does that mean for me? Go sell membership, go fulfill membership, and go change the world one member at a time. What does that mean for the franchise system? It probably means the franchisor is taking in their boot when the top performers are wanting to sell their studios, or the top performers, most well-known performers, whatever, but they're selling studios. If an all-star team starts leading a team, you can backfill those players, but now you have to hope that you can find other all-star teams that are still a Super Bowl winning team. And if you find just other team members, franchisor revenues go down, the value they can deliver goes down, and the franchisor is in a pickle. And so this may have some trickle-down effect a year or two from now. We'll see. One way or the other, though, all I know is I've got my business, I'm going to run my business, I'm going to run with this all the way through. And I'm going to make sure I can sleep at night, both morally and legally and ethically, on how this all goes out. So always do due diligence to the buyer, talk to local franchisees, and do references outside of what the broker or the franchisor asks you about. Because they're going to have you talk to certain people and frame the conversation. You need to talk to people outside of their frame so that you get a good lay of the land when you do it. And that's how you do due diligence. That's it. That's where we're going. Exactly.
This has been another episode of the Business Buyer Diaries. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I hope you're realizing that business ownership is no cakewalk. Check the podcast notes for a link to the DIY due diligence program, the complete list of show sponsors, and for media inquiries. Music written and composed by Wes Schrock. I'm your host, Nathan Platter. Join me again on the next one.